let's watch one of Abby Broyles' campaign videos since we're going to be doing that. Might as well give her a little free press. And kind of look at the tactics that they use in this, and how it compares to other people. Oh, that's not working.
This is a story about doers. In particular, Abby Broyles. Abby's a doer who grew up in Bethany. She graduated college in 2.5 years. She's an award-winning journalist who exposed corruption and then put herself through law school. Doers get off the sidelines, so now she's running for the U.S. Senate to get us out of this mess. Abby's going to do the stuff we need done because everyone knows when it's tough, you send an Oklahoma woman to get it done. I'm Abby Broyles, and I approve this message.
Perfect. Quick, easy campaign videos. Ms. Broyles. I just want to let you know, Ms. Broyles has a JD, so she has able to practice law and all that kind of stuff. She was a journalist over at Channel 4 KFOR here in Oklahoma City, and she is running against Senator Jim Inhofe, who's been in office longer. Longer than you've been alive, James?
28 years.
He's been in, well, I think 27 years. So just a few years, a long time. So she's running against him. She's a Democratic challenger. And I'll just kind of hand it over to you, Abby. And I'm going to spotlight your video. That way everybody can see it. You're up on the big screen and all that. So if you just want to introduce yourself, kind of talk about the race, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Sure, sounds good. Good morning. It's great to be with you all virtually today. In my campaign office right now, getting ready to make lots of phone calls. When you're running for office, you spend 40 hours a week raising money on the phone, and then I have events on top of that. So it's quite a busy time. But my name's Abby Broyles. I'm a lifelong Oklahoman. I was a journalist for 10 years and put myself through law school at night while working full-time at Channel 4. And I got in this race because, like so many people, I think Washington is badly broken. It's where career politicians are working for themselves instead of serving the people they were elected to represent. I knew Jim Inhofe. I had interviewed him for years. I covered politics for Channel 4, and I just saw firsthand how out of touch he is with everyday Oklahomans. He has been in office longer than most of you all have been alive. He's been in Washington, D.C. since 1987. He was first in the House and then was elected to this Senate seat in 1994 in a special election. He hasn't had a serious challenger in over a decade. And, this is really our opportunity to flip this seat and really have real representation for everyday Oklahomans in Washington. My top priority is healthcare. Protecting Oklahomans with pre-existing conditions. That's 1 in 3 of us. Most Oklahomans are 1 health emergency away from financial difficulty and 2 health emergencies away from financial ruin. Keeping the ACA in place will make sure that you all are able to stay on your parents' healthcare plan until you're 26. Student loan debt is another big issue for me. I'm sure that some of you all are dealing with that reality, or will be someday whenever you graduate and you're having to pay off those loans. And, if you're like me, and when I went to law school, I had to take out a loan, it was frightening to see that interest rate on your student loan look more like a credit card interest rate. Right now, Washington is not working for us. I'm a product of public education. I went to Bethany High School, and, so many of our public schools are suffering right now, and there's no leadership coming from Washington. Our kids are trying to do their lessons on their parents' cell phones, and that is just not a way to get a public education. But our race is going very well. We're running a very competitive race. We are winning in the 5th Congressional District. That is where Kendra Horn is the Congresswoman. We are also tied up in the Tulsa area. So between those 2 parts of the state, we have a real opportunity to win this in November. So most importantly, though, I got in this race because I care about the future of our state. And you all are that future. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have this morning about the race or where I stand on issues, or if you have any questions just about running for office in general. It's a fun time. It's an exciting time. It's also stressful, and running during a pandemic has been pretty interesting, but we've managed to make it work.
questions? Got a question?
No,
So I got a question. I'll
Sure.
start us off. What's it like running as a Democrat in Oklahoma?
You know, despite Jim Inhofe's attack ads, Democrats are Oklahomans too. You know, I don't consider my party being the very definition of who I am. I am a proud, lifelong Oklahoman. You know, I have democratic values like looking out for the little guy and protecting public education and healthcare. But beyond that, you know, I think that this race in particular is more about right versus wrong than red versus blue. This is about choices. We have someone who has been in office again since in DC since 1987. He's been in continual elected office though since LBJ was president. And you know, do we want 6 more years of the same, or do we want to take a chance on someone new? And so, yeah, it's tough running as a Democrat, and we are a red state, but this race is different. And Inhofe is polling 10 to 15 points below Trump statewide. And so our race it's not quite the same as the presidential race. There will be quite a bit of crossover from people voting for Trump, but also voting for me. So running as a Democrat, it's tough, but a Democrat can win in Oklahoma if we have the right message and we are talking to people directly where they are, which is why we are all over the place on digital and in person, and listening to constituents and listening to people across the state. We've been in so many communities where Jim Inhofe has never stepped foot, and people are ready to be heard and ready to be really represented in Washington.
Thank you. I think Zach has a question online. Zach, you can just unmute yourself and ask.
Sure.
I was wondering how you felt about adding term limits to people in the Senate and Congress.
That's a great question. And, you know, that would resolve some of these issues where we get these career politicians who go to Washington and get rich off of public service and we can't vote them out. I would say, you know, first, we do have term limits. They're elections, and it's the people's job to turn out to vote, to make our voices heard, and to vote people out when it's time to vote them out. You know, if you all are familiar with the process to have term limits, you would have to amend the Constitution. It's only been done a certain number of times in our country's history, and it's a really difficult process. And especially getting Congress on board to do that, to give themselves a shelf life, it's really difficult to pass that kind of constitutional amendment. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I do think that, you know, it is our responsibility as voters, as you know, participants in our democracy, to show up and vote, and that's how we determine how long people should stay in office.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Any questions in here? Throw me out a question.
actually,
I got one coming. Okay. Yeah.
What you think of public review, agree with you.
So what are some of your environmental policies? I know that the Green New Deal has been brought up a lot in attack ads and all that, but kind of what are your thoughts on environmental policy?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's going to be our generation that's going to fix the problems with climate change. For too long, this has just been pushed to the back burner, and my opponent, Jim Inhofe, thinks climate change is a hoax. You all may be too young to remember this, but he is the senator who brought a snowball onto the Senate floor several years ago in an effort to try to say climate change isn't real. Brought a snowball onto the Senate floor in the middle of winter. That's the kind of mentality we're dealing with. First and foremost, I believe climate change is real. We have to fight the adverse effects of it. It's common sense reformists, things that are already out there that we just are not pushing through, like caps on carbon emissions and setting realistic goals on a timeline to get that done. It's investing in wind and solar just as much as we invest in oil and gas. We are a great oil and gas state in Oklahoma, but I believe we can become the energy state. That is providing incentives to wind. If you all are familiar with northern Oklahoma, if you are driving into Enid on 412, there are these, there's a huge wind farm up there. we have innovators in our state working right now. We have these things in place, but we need to expand that wind farm up by Enid across the state of Oklahoma. There's no reason why Oklahoma is falling second to Texas when it comes to wind energy. But right now, we just don't have a forward-thinking leader making that a priority. We must fight the adverse effects of climate change now, or we are going to be in a world of hurt in just a couple of decades. And again, it's going to be our generation and you all who are electing leaders to create that change. And that's why it needs to start now.
Is there is there a specific reason you're running, why you're running against Jim Inhofe? I know you explained that he hasn't really done much in Congress, that he's kind of out of touch with current Oklahomans, but is there any specific thing that Jim Inhofe did that made you say, I got to go up again, I got to run against this man, I got to take the senator seat away from him?
So I don't know if you heard that, but I'll repeat the question. Kind of what was your defining moment that told you it was time to run against Jim Inhofe? Was there like a particular issue or thing he did that just kind of caused you to run?
Yeah, I've been speaking up for people who needed a voice my entire career. As an investigative journalist, I've sat in living rooms across the state of Oklahoma for 10 years, listening to families and listening to their struggles. And I wanted to be able to do something about it. It's one thing to listen to a family and put their story on the news every night, but not having the ability to fix problems was frustrating for me. It's why I put myself through law school so I could advocate for Oklahomans. But there was a story that made a huge impact that really got me off the sidelines, and that was in October. We had been covering a story at Channel 4 for 2 years with military families at Tinker Air Force Base who had mold and asbestos in their homes, and the conditions were absolutely terrible, not livable. They were calling Senator Inhofe's office and emailing, and they got no response from him. And so they started calling the news stations, and that's when we started telling their stories. I remember one day driving from law school to meet my photographer in Midwest City, and I pulled up and I saw kids carrying toys out of their homes into RVs across the street because they no longer could live in their homes anymore. And in October, Inhofe finally came down to Midwest City after 2 years, and he held a press conference. And I watched him tell these families that we'd gotten to know. He told them how nice their housing was. And if it was this nice when he was in the Army, he would have stayed longer. And it made me so angry because I thought, not only is he out of touch with Oklahomans, this is how he touts himself as chairman of the Armed Services Committee, yet he leaves military families behind. And it was a few weeks after that that I stepped down from my job as a news anchor at Channel 4 and jumped in this race.
Any other questions? Yeah.
You spoke of wanting to have equal representation in the Senate and maintaining that.
You can come up and ask her. Come up and ask her. Hold on
Yeah,
one
you're
second.
fine. I can't hear very well.
I know, yeah.
You spoke about having equal representation in the Senate earlier, and also about individuality being more important than party association. My question is, with Washington really just being red against blue nowadays, if you disagree with your party's views, are you going to take that stand out and vote against them?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I mean, yes, I will absolutely stand up to the Democratic caucus if what they are wanting me to vote on does not benefit Oklahoma. Keeping Oklahomans in mind on every single vote, whether it is a bill put forth by a Republican or a Democrat, it's always going to be first and foremost in my mind, what is best for Oklahoma? What's going to be best for the families that I've talked to back in Norman and back in Tulsa and Pryor and Pauls Valley? How can those families benefit from this piece of legislation? And if the Republicans are right, then I'll side with them. If the Democrats are right, then that's where my vote's going to be. But I think that right now we have too much partisan gridlock. My opponent toes the party line. We always know how he's going to vote. And that makes us lose some of our power with this Senate seat, is when you always know someone's just going to toe the party line, they don't have a seat at the negotiating table because you know how they're going to vote every time. Having leaders who are going to work across the aisle, that's how we get work done. And that is what effective leadership looks like. The Supreme Court stuff that's going on, you'll probably talked about this in your class, and maybe you've seen it on the news. The Republican Senate is trying to rush through this nomination before the election. And just 4 years ago, my opponent, Jim Inhofe, said that we should not confirm a Supreme Court nominee during a presidential year. We should let the people decide who's going to be our next president and then take up that nomination. I agreed with what he said in 2016, and now he's flip-flopped. And it's all because of partisan politics. If you go back to whenever RBG was confirmed to the Supreme Court, only 3 senators voted against her confirmation. 3. Can you imagine that now, having people on both sides of the aisle agree on a Supreme Court nominee? We have to get back to working together and working across the aisle. And what that means is a change in leadership. We have to vote out the old guard and bring in new leaders who are going to work together. There's a great caucus in Congress called the Problem Solvers Caucus, and it's made up of Democrats and Republicans, and they come together and sit at a table and find solutions to problems. We need to be working together like that in the spirit of bipartisanship, or else our country is going to continue to be so deeply divided like it is right now. And if you look at my opponent's ads, he is pushing further division. It's us versus them instead of let's find common ground, let's work together and actually get stuff done for Oklahoma so Oklahoma families aren't left behind.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, kind of final question. How can college students get involved in politics?
Yeah, well, first I want to know, is everybody registered to vote in your class?
I have one person who can't because she's too young.
Okay.
I got 2 people too young, but everybody else I think is registered to vote. We got 1.
Good. Well, I would encourage your friends to register to vote, and today is the voting registration deadline. So you can go online to the state's website. I believe you can print off the form, you can hand deliver it to the election board, or you can mail it in, but it has to be postmarked today to be able to register to vote. So please encourage your friends. Today, you've got to get it done, register to vote, and then turn out to vote. I'm telling you guys, this is the most important election of my lifetime, and it's also going to be your future. If you want safe communities and a good education and student loans that you can afford to pay off, and jobs, good quality jobs when you get out of college, we have to elect leaders who are going to be going to work for you. And I'd be honored to have your vote. I hope you encourage your families to get out and vote. Again, such an important election, and we just need to drive out turnout.
Well, perfect. Thank you, Abby. Thank you. Let's give her a round of applause today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and making the distinctions between you and Jim Inhofe. So when he comes, y'all will hopefully have plenty of questions and saw both sides and can kind of see where discrepancies are and all that kind of stuff, and ask and all that kind of stuff. So thank you so much, Abby. I know you got a busy day, so we'll be talking later.
Thank you all so much. Have a good weekend. Talk to you soon. Go Sooners.
Yes. Yeah, beat Texas. Okay. There we go.